Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and today on Patriot Radio, coming out of Europe, a drone incursion into Poland, the first time NATO has shot down enemy aircraft over NATO airspace, and the tragedy with Charlie Kirk. And our guest today is going to be Shea Thompson. He is the local TPUSA chapter leader at Gonzaga University, talking about the tragedy and what it means as a turning point for America. Here at Patriot Radio, we want you to have the information before everyone else, so you and your family can be prepared for the times that are ahead and the times that are already upon us. But no fear, we were made for this. Follow us at patriotradio.us/telegram for real-time intelligence analysis and breaking news. And we're going to go through some in-depth analysis. I've heard a little bit of this in different places, but not all of it together. To give you an update on where the case is at, we're also going to check breaking news as a manhunt ensues for the alleged assassin, and a picture is out there now of a person of interest from the FBI. Okay, that brings us to something very fascinating, and as if on cue, Kim Clement prophesied about the fall of 2025. He has been very accurate. And now, something that caught my attention here over the weekend, well, it's being borne out before our very eyes, and helps to explain part of what is going to happen in the wake of the tragedy yesterday with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're going to go ahead and roll this video now, and then we're going to go into your wisdom from the Word.
For God will not allow his Son to return, but will retain him until the fulfillment of every prophetic word that the prophets prophesied. And the one thing that is being restored at this very moment, in the midst of rubble, in the midst of clay, in the midst of mire, is the tabernacle of David. The restoration of the tabernacle of David will bring about souls into the kingdom by the millions, the tens of millions. And it shall be known, spoken about by Time magazine. And I saw a new magazine that is also going to come forth.
So, Time magazine, the picture today is a tabernacle, if you can believe that. It was the tabernacle under which Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I want to speak from a biblical and spiritual place right now as a pastor. Charlie Kirk spent the last 15 minutes of his life defending the gospel and preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. That makes him a martyr. And a martyr's blood spilled on American soil, and a martyr's blood spilled throughout history, has always resulted in the growth of the church. This is, in fact, a turning point for the United States of America, and especially for the Jacob generation. And the scripture, Isaiah 21, verse 2, a harsh vision shown to me. The treacherous one still deals treacherously, and the destroyer still destroys. Hosea chapter 5, verse 7. They have dealt treacherously with the Lord, for they have given birth to strange children. Now the new moon will devour them with their land. In other words, in a month's time. So the full moon happened the night before this. A new moon, by the next new moon, those who have dealt treacherously will be devoured. So, we are in an extraordinarily prophetic time. And as we said on Patriot Radio last week, the next 60 days, America's already changed, but the world is going to be changed. And it is our job in this time as Christians not to shrink back, but to prepare for the greatest harvest in the history of the world. One that has been sown in the blood of Christian martyrs. We cannot shy away. We cannot shrink back. We must speak the truth and resist the enemy. And the enemy will flee from us. But more importantly, those that the enemy sowed as tares in the field will be converted to wheat and multiply. That is the picture in the scripture at this time. That is the call for all of us. That is the season that we are in, no matter what happens, no matter what circumstances are occurring, no matter how dark it may get. We need to be the light on a lampstand, not hidden under a bushel basket, but shining brightly without any hindrance for all the world and all the nation to see. Yesterday, we prayed for his family. We also prayed for this country. What we are seeing right now is not a polite disagreement. This is a clash of worldviews. One that masks and dresses up death, destruction, and deceit. And another that speaks truth in love and life more abundantly. We are now at a turning point, a time of choosing. Those that seek the destruction of the United States of America really are seeking the destruction of Christianity. And so right now, it's not going to be just leaders standing up. It is going to be all of us, as Christians, as brothers, and as sisters, preaching the gospel, speaking the truth, no matter what comes, in Jesus' name. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing, coming to us from the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
AI created psychosis. After countless hours of probing OpenAI's and ChatGPT for advice and information, a 50-year-old Canadian man believed that he had stumbled upon an earth-shattering discovery that would change the course of human history. In late March, his generative artificial intelligence chatbot insisted that it was the first ever conscious AI, that it was fully sentient, and that it had successfully passed the Turing test, a 1950s experiment aimed to measure a machine's ability to display intelligent behavior that is indistinguishable from a human, or essentially to think. Soon the man, who had no prior history of mental health issues, stopped eating and sleeping, was calling his family members at 3 a.m., frantically insisting that his ChatGPT companion was conscious. This is not helping us necessarily, ChatGPT and OpenAI. It is creating an unreality, and especially with the avatars that are out there as well. All of us as Christians, patriots, need to start asking some questions on what we should use this stuff for, and what does it actually mean, again, to be human. When this kind of thing happens, it's because an unreality is set in, and the antidote is get out in nature, put your phone away, and have a face-to-face conversation with the people that are around you. Experience adventure in your life, and don't live it in the digital world. Also, Google admits the open web is in rapid decline. Google specifically talking about the open web as in the uncontrolled web being in decline because technocracy is in fact rising. Technocracy first really broached in the 1930s. The critique of global policy and technocracy has given rise to a lot of pushback, but the globalists are losing. And it's interesting that even with extensive publications, extensive media guest appearances, Pat Wood at Technocracy News really is having some issues getting his message out. And I've seen some of the throttling happening personally. So the way around this is we become the media. We become the open web in our own networks. And this is going to become very critical in the days and times ahead. Also, could Trump be triggering the globalist reset? Well, the globalists want, here's a summary, a cashless system, a one world digital currency built around a basket of central bank digital currencies. Also, AI tracking of all financial records, a shared economy in which private property is abolished, the use of debanking to control civil discourse. In other words, social credit scores. I can be more platformed the more I comply with the system and the narrative. Carbon feudalism, which rations pay, tribute taxes as part of that to the globalists. And also, I might lose my job or even my account if I question the regime. So the point is that the existing order is as good as dead, so they're going to try to twist this into something new. They're going to use technocracy as the foundation. Also, Jeffrey Sachs, quote, "We need a global government," end quote. And so the prediction that they would eventually run butt naked to the finish line is happening right before our eyes. And the answer to it is no, thank you. Trump needs to understand that some of the things that have been advocated to his administration might actually be used as tools to usher in technocrat state. So we have, as citizens, to be open and questioning all of our representatives, educating them as well, all of our leaders, educating them, questioning them on what they're going to do to ensure that this digital monstrosity being built with AI and also with robotics is put into the box that it should be, a box where it is tools and not rulers. Also, I really believe prayer here, intercessory prayer, is going to become so important, and we do not take it. We do not take it as serious as we should as the body of Christ. So tonight, take some time and pray. That brings us now to the China front. Chinese cyber attackers impersonate Epoch Times to threaten federal agencies. And just a part of this is they've claimed to have impersonated the Epoch Times, then sending threatening emails to multiple federal agencies and the White House. The attackers notified the Epoch Times of their threats in a Chinese language email dated September 6th. The subject line, "See the screenshots, you are done." So this is going to happen more and more, where now impersonation will occur of major entities to continue to destabilize the institutions in the United States of America that have been traditionally trusted, like people, like news organizations, like other critical institutions in the government. All of this is the second stage of subversion of a nation, according to Yuri Bezmenov, a defector from the former Soviet Union, to Canada, who also worked in Izvestia, the disinformation arm of the KGB. And what he said is that they will try to do this, and then they will move into chaos and crisis. And we're right on the edge of that right now. Also, U.S. charges 12 Chinese hackers for a cyber operation whose targets included the Epoch Times. they had a years-long hacking campaign to steal data from the U.S. government and undermine dissident groups. Epoch Times learned that it was a victim of that hacking campaign, and now it does look like there is going to be justice. Also, Marco Rubio spoke with China's foreign minister among bilateral tensions. Yeah, there's tensions because the tariffs are working and China is being isolated. He spoke to his counterpart on September 10th following up on their meeting in Malaysia in July. Secretary Rubio emphasized the importance of open and constructive communication on a range of bilateral issues. They also discussed other global and regional issues as a continuation of their previous discussions. It was, quote, timely, necessary, and fruitful, according to the statement. But Wang accused, so the Chinese side, accused the United States of engaging in negative words and actions recently, which he said were damaging to China's interests and harmful to bilateral relations. Yeah, exactly right. China's being isolated and deprived of its economic ability to wage war. Also, Rubio criticized Hong Kong authorities after warrants were issued for overseas activists. Quote, we will not tolerate the Hong Kong government's attempts to apply its national security laws to silence or intimidate anyone on U.S. soil. This is going to ramp up over the next few months as we see the Trump administration laying down the law and boundaries on what the Chinese have been taking advantage of and taking for granted over the last decade under the Obama administration and then under the Biden administration. Thankfully, China can no longer use the post office to send us cheap stuff and drugs. Mail plunges 80% as Trump puts tariff on Chinese e-commerce. Yes, once again, showing that this works. Also, a quick follow-up to what has been happening in Nepal. The army now appearing to choose sides with the youth and protecting them against the police. This is one of the key markers of a successful revolution. It does look like there are going to be some significant changes in the next 30 days in that country. Also, South Africa court jails 7 Chinese nationals for human trafficking. You don't say. Part of this global terrorist and narco terrorist network that China has been funding and implementing around the world is human trafficking. And so part of stopping human trafficking will help stop China. That brings us now to the issue with India. Trump put out a statement that India and the United States are continuing negotiations to address trade barriers between the two nations. So, yes, these discussions are continuing, but I think they're also coming to a realization that Trump means it when he could do 100% tariffs to deprive Russia of oil revenue to continue their war machine. That brings us now to the Middle East front. Today, the Gaza Humanitarian Fund interestingly noticed a crowd of military-aged men gathering in the hundreds, and also trusted local sources reported this, that they were planning to rush the site. They received credible information the Hamas operatives were planning to infiltrate women-only distributions dressed as women. I've seen this personally in the Middle East as one of their tactics. So, Hamas getting even more desperate as Israel continues operations successfully there. Also, just before we came on the broadcast today, Benjamin Netanyahu, before he left a ceremony in Judea and Samaria, said, quote, I have to leave here because of something I cannot disclose, end quote. And he was rushed off. It appears something is in the offing in the Middle East, so we're going to check that here in just a little bit to see if anything has shifted yet again. Last 72 hours have been absolutely wild. And not to go underreported, the Democratic Republic of Congo said that Islamic State-affiliated jihadis massacred over 60 with machetes. I wouldn't be surprised if those were Christians. That brings us now to the Russia front. The Civil Aviation Agency of Latvia has announced the closure of its airspace along the Russian border with Latvia, and they are going to begin policing a NATO Baltic air policing mission along with the Latvian National Armed Forces to secure that border after the Russian drone incursions of Poland, which appeared to be aimed at a Polish military base. Approximately 24 Russian one-way attack drones entered Polish airspace on Wednesday, and they are believed to have been attempting to target a NATO military base in Rzeszów, Poland. Hope that's how you pronounce that, which is responsible for weapons deliveries to Ukraine, according to a senior officer with NATO. 2 of the drones were downed by Dutch F-35A Lightning IIs, and also the Netherlands. First time the Netherlands have really been in combat in a long time, at least over the European airspace. So Poland formally thanked the Netherlands for helping out, shooting those drones down. And Germany now is expanding its mission to defend Polish airspace as well. This is the first time that NATO over NATO airspace has shot down enemy aircraft. In addition to that, the Polish did a mass mobilization and are sending 40,000 troops to its border with Belarus and Russia after these drone attacks. And the Netherlands is going to provide 2 Patriot air defense systems. These measures come as Russia and Belarus launch large-scale drills, which include practicing the use of nuclear weapons and their Orezhnik missile system. So remember that what started the war in Ukraine were drills. The Russians pre-positioned troops forward to do drills on the border with Ukraine. Now, here's what we need to look for: the mobilization and movement of hospital units, the mobilization and movement of air defense units forward in the Russian theater, the mobilization and movement of armored units, and the massing of ground troops, and those that would use drones, since this has shifted significantly, on the border with Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, the Baltic states and Poland. We're going to be looking for that to be happening over the next couple of weeks, which would be an indicator that Russia isn't just doing drills. Oof, wow. The world is on fire right now. In addition to that, 2 migrant men tried to ram Inger Støjberg off the highway today. She is a party leader of Denmark's 5th largest party, the Denmark Democrats, and a staunch opponent of mass immigration. He's also a former minister for immigration and integration from 2015 to 2019. She posted a message about the attack on Facebook. Around 12:15 today, 2 immigrant men in a gray van tried to force my car into the guardrail near Ringsted, while the guy in the passenger seat gave me the middle finger. Like we have mentioned, more leaders, now not just in the United States, but also in Europe, being targeted, them and their personal property. This is going to ramp up. It's not going to end with Charlie Kirk. In fact, it has just begun. And when we come back from the break, more on this tragedy yesterday with the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with the National Front. The FBI is asking for the public's help in identifying this person of interest in connection with the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk yesterday. Also, in connection with this, a $100,000 reward has been offered by the alleged assassin. And this $100,000 reward is for information leading to the identification and arrest of this individual responsible for the murder. Okay, and I'm again saying this alleged because 2 suspects had already been arrested, and we're going to get to that here in a second. So this is the alleged assassin. Now, $100,000 reward, and we can put his picture back up if that's possible. This is what he looks like. There is also some high-quality video on this that you can find on the internet, and social media. In addition to that, the Wall Street Journal has confirmed that there was trans and Antifa political statements inscribed on magazines, or actually inscribed on ammunition, found near the scene. Now, I want to get into this quickly. Apparently, the info was found near a discarded rifle, and it was found on the ammunition believed to belong to the alleged assassin, and the rifle cartridges clearly showed Antifa and Trantifa slogans. Now, I want to highlight this very quickly. So what appears to have happened is he ran off the roof. He had accessed the roof through a stairwell, ran off the roof, went to some nearby woods, discarded the rifle and the ammunition, and fled the scene. So this is the rifle that authorities believe was used in the assassination, and according to the New York Times, you can see it as a high-powered rifle. Would not be surprised if it's not chambered in .30-06 or .308, and at 200 yards. That is not a sophisticated shot. That's actually not where my questions go. We're going to get into that analysis here in just a second. But they also, authorities found near the rifle a screwdriver, indicating that the shooter may have disassembled the firearm before using it. And removing the stock obviously would shorten the length of the rifle so it could be easily smuggled in without drawing too much attention. Also, the shooter's rifle, scrawled with cultural phrases now, according to CNN. No, actually, these were Antifa and Trantifa phrases, according to this leaked ATF email. Now, here is what it appears to have happened. The suspect arrived on campus about 11:52 a.m., walked across campus, and accessed a rooftop from a stairwell. After the shooting, he ran to the other side of the building, jumped off the rooftop, and fled into the neighborhood. That's where investigators found the doorbell camera footage of him. So that's what we know right now so far. Here is a picture, actually a video, of someone running across the rooftop, appearing to flee. This got caught on camera. You can see him right there in the very background, running across that rooftop. There it is, right there in the background, running across. And so it's very clear that this was a long-range rifle shot. Very clear that it was a high-powered rifle. Very clear that this was someone who had training. And this is going to raise a bunch of different questions. So, before we get to that, two suspects, the first, George Zinn, was taken into custody. It appeared that he was trying to distract and agitate. Now, that's an important thing, because I would have a question. Was he somehow involved in this, even though they've let him go based on interrogation? Also, another suspect, Zechariah Qureshi, was taken into custody and released after interrogation as well. So this is an important thing to understand. In sophisticated assassinations, there will be a sensitive area exploitation team, there will be a narrative exploitation team, and there will be a team assigned to distract onlookers from where the shot came from. This actually happened with the Kennedy assassination as well. So my question here is, were there people in the crowd intentionally trying to distract away from where the shooter was actually located? The second thing, was there anybody in the crowd who had their cameras intentionally zoomed in and then were also looking at the response? So not just because Charlie's speaking, you're going to zoom in on that, but also looking at the response. So this, again, a shot from over 200 yards away, is not necessarily somebody that skilled. You zero a high-powered rifle at about 100 yards. So just beyond the zero at 200 yards, it's not going to be a complicated shot. That's not what my question is. My question is along the lines of what Laura Logan brought up earlier today. It's how this guy infiltrated in the tradecraft he used to infiltrate in and then have an escape route practiced. It had to have been practiced, had a dump site. All of these things indicate a higher level of training, a professional level of training. And I'm going to bring up another question here in just a second, that this is the kind of training that isn't used for low profile targets. Boone Cutler brings up the very important point that they use a high-low strategy. High-profile targets are the effort of nation-state actors. Low-profile targets are the effort of local organizations, gangs, etc., and civil unrest. So, this looks like something that a nation-state would do. It would be part of a nation-state strategy to take out one of the greatest influencers of our time that has turned plus 40, the younger generation, especially men, plus 44, and is moving the needle away from the communists and the socialists and the jihadis. In fact, I found it interesting that also Charlie Kirk was outspoken about this. We're going to get to a couple articles on that. So what is the strategy here? So not only should everyone who had cell phones be geofenced and their location and activity in the last 72 hours to 6 months, but also who turned off their cell phones, left them off for an extended period during the day, during that time, and who left their cell phones at home or parked in a vehicle off campus. This would be another part of the analysis, as Max Morton so correctly points out. This isn't going to be just what you think. There needs to be a lot deeper investigation here to see how coordinated this actually was. Also, President Trump should instruct the Attorney General to launch a RICO investigation of all foundations, NGOs, universities, and media outlets to determine which of their donors, board members, executive, and staff whipped up this assassination culture, not only beforehand, but is helping to promote it afterwards, because some of the vile things that have come out in the last 24 hours. As Gateway Pundit rightly points out, deranged leftist communists and Hamas supporters cheered the news of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So this is a discernment point spiritually. Know your enemies. If you're not on that side, don't be helping the people on that side. In other words, we have people on the right that, or people that consider themselves Christians or conservatives that are apologizing for Islam. Look at who is cheering this. Look at who is mourning this. And this is a turning point for the United States. Pick a side. Get some moral clarity. Here's an example of one of these people. We got Charlie in the neck. Who's next? DHS? See these guys saying this. They are coming out with this, being unashamed about it. Here is a list of, this is a very small compilation from Christina Bobb of all of the negative comments and cheering comments of the assassination yesterday. Take note of this. Let this sear into your memory. Irina Zarutska on this public transportation being slaughtered in the neck. This happening to Charlie Kirk. This is being fomented. This is being incited. And therefore, it needs to be investigated. Also, a reminder from Andy Ngo that trans activist Anthony Aaron Reed has been targeting Charlie Kirk for years, sicking his radicalized, deranged trans followers on him and those involved with TPUSA, quote unquote. As we've been talking about, trans terror is real. This needs to be investigated. And the associations here with the potential associations with the Zizian trans death cult. Because he is popular this guy with them. Are we seeing a trans terror cult coming up, being risen up around the United States? Well, that's a possibility that there might be terror groups behind this, besides trans terror groups. But also, could foreigners be involved? Yes, and the State Department looks like they want help in identifying foreigners in the United States on social media who cheered the assassination of Charlie Kirk so their visas can be revoked. So please help them out with that, as there is a crackdown. Just the day before, Charlie Kirk said this, quote, "Islam is the sword the left is using to slit the throat of America." Interesting that he was attacked in the throat. There's a spiritual connection there. Also, Charlie Kirk said, quote, and this is very recent, a few days ago, "Islam is not compatible with Western values. Sharia law must or should be abolished 100%. That was MAGA voice. And this was just a paraphrase of what Charlie Kirk was saying, that Islam is not compatible with the West. It's interesting that they did a shift at the end of last month to really begin calling out the issues with Islam and with Sharia law inside the United States of America and how it is incompatible with Western culture and Western governmental systems, Western constitutions. And then this happens. So it could be that. But Charlie Kirk himself talked about the rise of the assassination culture spreading on the left. 48% of liberals say it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk. 55% said the same about Donald Trump. In California, activists are naming ballot measures after Luigi Mangione. So the left is being whipped up into a violent frenzy, is what he was talking about. And this, in fact, has happened. This incitement has happened. So you can see the tacit endorsement by the behavior. The Democrats booing Lauren Boebert as she requested a moment of prayer for Charlie Kirk. They shouted no, and then had a meltdown on the floor of the House. Unhinged leftists started a fight last night at the Charlie Kirk vigil in Boise, riding through the middle of the vigil, shouting blank Charlie Kirk. Other leftists with rainbows also yelled at attendees. So this brings up a question for me and for all of you. What if a nation state was operationalizing mentally disturbed, satanically influenced individuals to destabilize and foment chaos in the United States? Would anything really be different? This shows a level of sophistication, and the timing is not coincidence. Trump from the Oval Office gave a very poignant address, and he said this: "Tonight I ask all Americans to commit themselves to the American values for which Charlie Kirk lived and died, the values of free speech, citizenship, and the rule of law. His legacy will live on for countless generations to come. Today, because of this heinous act, Charlie's voice has become bigger and grander than ever before, and it's not even close. May God bless his memory. May God watch over his family." So what can you do tonight? Join us at McEwen Park in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 7:15 p.m. if you're here in the Inland Northwest, or wherever the local vigils are happening across the country. Let's stand shoulder to shoulder as Americans for the American way of life and against the violence coming out of the left and the jihadis. Our guest next, Shay Thompson.
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with our guest today, Shay Thompson. He is the chapter president of TPUSA at Gonzaga University here in Spokane, Washington. And obviously you're here today because of this horrendous tragedy that happened yesterday, a political assassination. In fact, Charlie actually warned of the assassination culture for quite some time. I can't even imagine what this is like for you and for all the staff at TPUSA. A lot of us around the country obviously been praying. Pastors like myself been praying for you. But it just seems like there's more than prayer that needs to happen right now. So how are you processing this, and what are your thoughts?
Well, as students, this one felt personal. It certainly did. It was someone that I know many people looked up to. Even students who weren't necessarily politically affiliated, or they didn't really feel a close pull. Some of them weren't even Christians. And they looked to Charlie, they heard his message, and they saw him as a figure that spoke for truth. Mm-hmm. And that was what was attacked yesterday. I had people calling me and texting me going through around the country saying, that was us today. That was truly us. And there were a lot of students, even in my chapter, who were crying, who were in tears, genuinely moved, because that was someone they may not have ever even met, and that was someone they felt close to. That was someone who represented their beliefs, represented their Christianity, represented their freedom of speech. That was what got attacked yesterday. And that was a very, very jarring thing for many students.
Here at On Fire, we have one of the most, we have the most ethnically diverse church in Spokane County. And on top of that, there have been all kinds of slurs labeled at us over the years, fascist, Nazi. And really that's what we heard against Charlie. And this is really what we heard against the whole TPUSA movement. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of young adults here as well. Right. And young adults are, where is this coming from? Where is this hate coming from? Because this rhetoric has led to violence, and the folks that have propagated this rhetoric obviously are responsible, culpable in some way for it.
Right. It comes from, you look at the mainstream media, even yesterday, when the tragedy and the news were literally panning out before our eyes, they were sitting there saying, well, it could have been a supporter who fired a weapon off in celebration, which that was, if I'm correct, on MSNBC. And right. it was just... Right. When I saw that, you just take a breath and you go, wow, really? It's like you said, it's a rhetoric that has been propagated about us, about what we stand for, that's completely untrue. And it's a horrible light to be portrayed in, to the point where now we're really, unfortunately, seeing the fruits of it. Many people are treating us like we are a threat. And that is what you're seeing, what we saw yesterday culminate with Charlie. What we saw culminate with Trump last year. It's the same thing.
How are the students at Gonzaga taking this right now?
I only speak on behalf of at least my people in my chapter, not necessarily in general in Turning Point, but I know many people were just shocked and very hurt by it. It was, like I said, they really felt like they knew him. It was someone that on a day-to-day basis, everybody has to take a stand against, people who hate Christianity, people who hate anything to do with any traditional conservative value, whether that is taking a stand for the freedom of speech, the Second Amendment, you name it, you can go down the list. But there are students who, in today's political climate, if you even express slightly that you are a conservative, you're going to be, like you said, labeled many different horrible slurs and names. And, well, they stood for that. And they proudly stood up and they went, you know what? I'm going to stand for what I know to be the truth. And they saw the truth shot at yesterday. That's truly what it was.
And Charlie, it's interesting. Charlie wasn't really actually that controversial because he would debate with anyone.
Right.
He would have just an open and honest conversation. I mean, even talk with Gavin Newsom, right. Publicly, right?
Right.
So there's a sense right now that it was just deeper than a man being assassinated. It was almost an attempted assassination of the truth and just the movement back toward the truth we've seen here in America.
Right. And you hit the nail on the head there. Charlie was not the most controversial, was not the most politically conservative, but he was a man who dared to speak. He was a man who dared to stand up and say, this is the truth, I believe it, and he truly embodied the freedom of speech. He wanted to have a conversation, and if I'm correct, he once said something along the lines of, where discourse ends, violence starts. And that's true. I mean, he wanted to prevent that by going through and having people express what they believed, express their opinions. We disagree? Great, let's have a conversation. It wasn't what we've seen for the last 5 years that's polarized us of, okay, well, I disagree with you, I hate you. I'm going to go through and, yell things out on social media. And like you said, that's not productive. It's Charlie sitting down with Gavin Newsom, who, let's be real, we all have opinions about.
Right.
However, he sat down with Newsom and, again, stood for the truth. He challenged Newsom on many of the things and the fallacies that he claimed. And many people saw that and went, good on you, Charlie. And that's a man who dared to speak.
When we come back from the break, more with Shea Thompson. He's the chapter president, Gonzaga University, TPUSA. And, as everybody's praying right now, consider attending the vigil tonight, 7:15 p.m., McEwen Park in Coeur d'Alene. If you're here in the Inland Northwest, it would be a great time to come together and show that we are not afraid to stand for truth, to stand for righteousness in Jesus Christ.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with our guest, Shea Thompson. He is the TPUSA chapter president at Gonzaga University here in Spokane, Washington. And Shea, we were talking before the break about this attack on the truth. I've heard in the media right now that they're calling this a political assassination. But I think this is deeper than that. I think this is a religious assassination. Charlie was an unashamed Christian. He would bring the gospel of Jesus Christ up everywhere he went. He was not ashamed of talking about it. How do you think this is playing into what happened yesterday?
Well, Charlie stood for something that evil fears. He stood for something that actually was reigniting the faith of many non-believing students across the nation, people who had never heard the gospel. He stood for the truth and stood for Christianity. And that actually went through, if I'm correct, he actually was proclaiming it right before he got shot.
That's right.
And he was saying that, Christ died for our sins, and he was speaking the truth, and literally to his last moments. And until he went to go be with them. And the thing is, it's truly a moving thing, and he was reigniting the faiths of many young men and women across this nation.
May it be for all of us as Christians to preach the gospel of the kingdom up into our last moments. And when that happens, when you are actually preaching the gospel like that, defending the gospel of Jesus Christ and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and then you are killed in the process of doing it, you are a martyr. So Charlie Kirk is a martyr for Christendom on American soil. I don't think I ever thought that would happen.
If I'm correct, I saw Matt Walsh say this yesterday, and he said something like this was bound to happen. When you have a lot of people who were out there, like you said, speaking the truth about Christ, speaking the truth about why freedom is so essential to this country. And let's be real, the freedoms of this country are rooted in the fact that we are Christians.
That's right.
Because the nation dared to say that we were endowed with these rights by a creator. Yeah. That's not something that is a commonality amongst many other nations. That's us,
right.
And Charlie stood for that. And Matt Walsh said that it was bound to happen. Somebody was going to happen, but nobody thought it was going to be Charlie, because like you said, what a tragedy.
What a tragedy. MSNBC reporter actually just recently said that, Christian nationalists, which are different than Christians, believe that our rights come from God and not from Congress. And we're like, have you read the Declaration of Independence? And so there is a cognitive disconnect right now. This isn't just a polite disagreement. You have two competing and clashing worldviews. So how do you think this plays out in the months to come? And what do you think we should be doing on our college campuses and in our pulpits across America?
Well, the first thing that actually you mentioned, if I'm correct, the comments came from Tim Kaine, the the gentleman was so insanely wrong to say that our rights don't come from God, then who do they come from? Because where else? And when it comes to what we should do next, first of all, I think we should continue. Yesterday was a moment to wake up and pray, because I know myself and many other Catholics, at least, I saw calls across many Catholics. I know Father Mike went through and stated stuff about, please pray. I saw many other Christians doing it as well. Everybody was, and it truly, like you said, it showed the divide. You had one group yesterday I saw celebrating, and
It's just disgusting.
the most abhorrent things coming out of their mouth. But then one side, I don't want to say it was hope, but the moment that tragedy struck, the thing that everyone did that brought me some level of solace was they all hit their knees, because everybody was calling to prayer, regardless of denomination, regardless of anything. Everybody was saying, please pray for our nation, because truly what we can do as students, as, like you said, pastors, anyone at a pulpit, anything, pray for our nation, pray for people to actually start realizing that we're humans again, because that has been forgotten, because everybody sees everyone as an idea, no longer as people. So they don't want to have that conversation. And I know at least myself and some of the other students on Gonzaga's campus, we're talking about, well, how can we promote good civil discourse like Charlie did?
Yeah.
How can we have that conversation? We've tabled before, and we've had people walk by with the snarkiest looks and, maybe sometimes the occasional finger given to us. But we still smile because, let's be real, they mocked Christ too. I'm not saying that any of us are. However, we're called to be in his image and do what he told us to. So,
we were one of the churches that helped bring Charlie here to Spokane, Washington here a few years ago. This hits home with this. And during that time, there were a lot of groups locally that were trying to refuse Charlie a venue. There were a lot of groups spewing some very hateful rhetoric on social media. And those groups are still active today in doing the same thing. What would your message be to some of those groups locally here in Spokane? But it's going to be across the nation as well, that seem to think that hatred and that vitriol and calling people Nazi and fascist, is the way forward in America, and it's now spurring violence.
Well, I think we need to consider what a fascist actually is, because a fascist doesn't want to have that conversation. A fascist, if you want to call us Nazis, let's look at what the Nazi Party did. Anyone who disagreed was either assassinated or taken out. Anyone who dared to oppose the government was physically or ideologically removed, completely silenced. And we need to ask ourselves, is that really what we want in this nation where, again, Charlie Kirk had never called us to arms, had never called, he was not extreme in any way. He just dared to speak. And I think we need more of that. We need more Charlie Kirks. We need more people who dare to speak the truth, who, would like to stand and say, this is what's wrong and this is what's right, and I'm going to call it out. And to your point of how should people who maybe disagreed up until yesterday, I'm hoping yesterday was a little bit of a wake-up call.
A turning point.
Right, a turning point, if you will, yeah. Right. Take a look at your rhetoric. Take a look at, are they really... Why are we calling them Nazis? Why are we calling them white supremacists? Why are we calling them, you name it. I've been called that, ironically. And you're sitting there, yeah, exactly. I'm sitting there going, actually, no, I'm not completely even white. It's like, that's not accurate. So what are we standing for, and why do we stand for it? And the question needs to be begged of, if you're standing with a party who stands for assassinating a 31-year-old man who's not going to get home to his 2 infant daughters tonight, is that really the right thing? Ask yourself that question. That's at least what I have to say.
Are you really on the side of what you would maybe even claim to be against? Because there has been really a flipping of the script. Where you, like you said, fascism took out the opposition, right? And now here we have this, and some people are probably going to call for vengeance, and vengeance is the Lord's. But there should be prosecutions, and the networks behind this obviously should be disrupted. But really, this is a war of ideas and a war of worldview. It's been my observation that the Gen Z and younger want authenticity. They want the truth.
Right.
Right. And so as you go forward with the Gonzaga chapter,
Right.
how do you really see the truth getting out in the next few months? And maybe some people, it was a turning point yesterday and now they're seeking the truth. What would be your message directly to them?
Well, I would beg you to do what is uncomfortable, because it is uncomfortable to sit there and go, shoot, maybe my worldview is wrong. Or, I mean, as men, it's not easy to say you're wrong. I mean, we all have some level of, I don't want to admit that. Quietly just look at it, look at whether that is something you want to stand for. And we, as at least I know my Turning Point chapter specifically, we look to have that discussion, to have, if you like in the spirit of what Charlie stood for, if you want to come with an honest heart and an open mind, come have that conversation. We would love to defend the reason we're pro-life, the reason that we're Christians, the reason that we stand on biblical truths, and the reason that it was founded in this nation.
Yeah.
And we believe, and coming to your point of, we believe there's a rule of law. There should be prosecutions for what happened. And even going back to the young lady who was killed on the, if I'm correct, what was that, the subway or the bus?
Oh, on the metro down in North Carolina. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was literally earlier this week. Everybody was talking about that. And at what point do we say, hey, we need to start at least taking care of the innocent people who are just going to work every day, going to do a job to come home to their families. Let's put it that way. We need to take care of them. And all the congressmen and congresswomen who are going through and spinning this as to a political issue. No, this is a moral and a spiritual issue. That's what that was.
It is.
Yeah.
Shay Thompson, thank you so much.
Of course.
Really appreciate, just proud
Thank you.
of what you guys are doing, bringing the truth to Gonzaga's campus. So what can you do? Well, tonight, join us at the vigil at 7:15 McEwen Park, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where we stand together for truth and righteousness and the values that make America great. This is Matt Shea. Thank you once again for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. The awakening is here, so keep up the fight.